Welcome back. In this lecture, we'll be exploring some of the themes that come up in the middle books of Homer's Odyssey. You've been examining the role that civilization has to play in Book 9, the Polyphemus adventure. So right now, why don't we move ahead to Book 10, where we have different kinds of adventures. So in Book 10, Odysseus and his men have a visit to Aeolia, which is a floating island that's encased in bronze. And what's happening at the Oikos of Aeolus, the god of winds, during Odysseus' visit? Xenia is indeed offered to Odysseus and his men. There's ample food and drink. However, there's a notable difference. Unlike a normal Oikos, there's incest going on here in that Aeolus has married off 6 of his sons to 6 of his daughters. He gives Odysseus magic in order to help him home. He stuffs a bag full of wind in order to help Odysseus sail back to his Ithaca. And as soon as he's within sight of home, Odysseus manages to fall asleep. And while he's asleep, his men, thinking that it's some sort of treachery in the bag or believing that it's gifts for Odysseus, open it up. And when they do, the wind flies out and blows them right back to Aeolia, the home of the winds. At this point, Aeolus curses Odysseus, or tells him that he is in fact cursed, and sends him away. So here we get this inversion of Xenia at the end of this adventure, where Odysseus is actually denied rights of hospitality. Not deterred from his adventures, Odysseus ventures on to the land of the Laestrygonians. What's going on in the Oikos of the Laestrygonians here? They invite Odysseus' men to their house in a show of Xenia, and when Odysseus' men get there, they are eaten. And the locals, in fact, engage in a form of cannibalism. They spear Odysseus' ships with harpoons as they're trying to leave, and bash them with boulders. So it's kind of like the adventure with the Cyclopes, in that these men, if you can call them men, are giant and don't have any fear for what happens to human beings who eat other human beings. They have houses, unlike the Cyclopes, but they don't have normal civilization in the way you and I would think of it. So Aeneas and his men sail on to the land of Aiaia, which is the home of the dread witch goddess Circe. And Circe is an interesting character. She's actually the daughter of the sun and the aunt of Medea, who's a character you're going to meet later. She's kind of a superwoman in that she has access to drugs and is quite powerful. She also has access to her own home and controls it. She also knows the way to the underworld. So she's not quite like any character we've met so far. What's happening in the house of Circe when Odysseus' men first visit? Circe invites Odysseus' men into her house in an apparent show of Xenia. And I guess there should have been some indicators on the outside of Circe's house that things weren't on the up and up. There were wolves and lions walking around the house on their hind legs, and they were being as kind to Odysseus' men as if they were human beings. Odysseus' men are welcomed in, they drink a potion, and then Circe hits them with her wand, causing them to turn into pigs. Then she orders them to go stay in the pigsties behind the house. Notice that there are no men on the island in human form. All of the work seems to be done either by magic or by magical servants. However, what makes Circe's household a little like the other households we've come across so far is that when we run across her, she is weaving a tapestry, like a quote-unquote normal woman would in a normal home. It's at this point that Odysseus will come to meet Circe and face the danger head-on. Odysseus' encounter with Circe is ruled by a couple of factors. Odysseus is afraid of Circe, and rightly so. He actually encounters the god Hermes on the way up to Circe's palace. And Hermes warns him that bad things will happen with Circe if he isn't mindful. So he reaches into the ground and pulls out an herb called mole, which he gives to Odysseus. So through Odysseus's use of this herb and his cleverness, he will get around the dangers. What does he need to do? He needs to eat the mole so that when he drinks Circe's poison, he won't turn into a pig. And after he doesn't turn into a pig, he'll come at Circe with his sword. And it's at this point that she'll offer to have sex with him. Now, you would imagine that Hermes would advise staying away from this, but Hermes says go for it. The reason being for this is that it's only if Odysseus wins over Circe that he can get his men turned back into humans. He has to make Circe swear an oath that she won't castrate him while they're having sex, though. And this seems to be Odysseus' real fear, not being turned into a pig, but being turned into something that's not a man. Odysseus and his men actually enjoy quite a bit of hospitality at the home of Circe. They end up staying there and feasting for a full year. And it's only at the end of this time that his men say to him, "We have to move on, we have other things to do." Circe offers to help him out one more time by telling him what it is he has to do. And when he hears it, he's not happy. Odysseus has to go to the underworld to find out what his next move is. And this leads us to the word of the day, which is katabasis. Katabasis comes from the Greek words kata and bino. Kata is a preposition meaning down, and bino is to go. So it's a journey downwards. And this is a typical adventure for a mythological hero. Like Hercules, whom we'll be meeting later today, Odysseus has to go into the underworld to get something. In this case, it's information about what his journey is. Where is the underworld? The underworld is far, far to the west. It's actually beyond the edge of the ocean. It was so far to the west that in the Greek imagination it was in a permanent state of twilight. How did Odysseus get into the underworld? He had to get there through what's called a chthonic ritual. In a chthonic ritual, he had to cut a trench into the ground and sacrifice some rams. And by pouring their blood into the trough, he was allowed access. Spirits would then come out and consume the blood. They had no body, and yet they were still frightened by his swords. And I guess we should talk about what the Greek vision of the underworld is like at this point. Most mortals who go there are neither in paradise or in torment. They just are in this eternal gray. And it's sad and gloomy, but not necessarily eternal torment. Whom does Odysseus meet along his way? He meets Elpenor, a member of his crew who has only recently died. Elpenor demands that Odysseus go back and bury him as soon as he can. He'll meet Tiresias, the famous prophet from Thebes, and this is his reason for being there. He knows how to tell Odysseus what to do next. He'll meet Anticlea, his own mother. It turns out that Anticlea died out of grief when Odysseus had been gone for so long. He'll run into Agamemnon. And this is interesting because Agamemnon warns Odysseus not to trust his wife too much. He warns him that if he trusts his wife too much, she'll betray him. Agamemnon asks Odysseus if he knows the whereabouts of his son Orestes. Of course, Odysseus has no idea what's going on with Agamemnon's son. He'll run into Achilles. Achilles is not thrilled about the way things have gone for him. In fact, in his meeting with Achilles, Achilles will reject the same values that he had reaffirmed at the end of the Iliad. He doesn't think it's a good idea that he went and died for glory, because now he's dead and living in the underworld, which is gray and dark all the time. He runs into Ajax, and Ajax is not happy with him. We'll get to why later. He'll also run into a phantom of Hercules, and Hercules has a phantom in the underworld, not because he's dead, he's actually a god. Before he was a god, he was only a half-god or hero, and it was in the act of dying that he became a god. He still left a body behind, and the gods simultaneously brought him up to Olympus and sent part of him down to the underworld as a shade, so he's permanently in both places. Who else will Odysseus meet? He'll also see a catalog of women, as I call it, who were sent by Persephone, the goddess of the dead. He'll meet the grandmother of Jason. He'll meet Alcmene, the mother of Hercules. He'll meet Jocasta, mother of Oedipus from Thebes. He'll meet Leda, the mother of Castor and Polydeuces, and many, many others. Why are they paraded before us? Each one of these women is the mother of a hero. And I think in the author's mind, that is their glory. Remember, we also meet Anticlea, Odysseus' mother, and she is also the mother of a hero. So it only makes sense that she would be included in this somewhere. Who else do we see in the underworld? We also see great sinners. Again, while you shouldn't think of the underworld in the Greek imagination as their version of hell, you should think of it as a place where sinners who have done fantastically bad things are punished for eternity. The first one we meet is a guy named Tydeus, who was a giant who tried to rape Leto, the mother of Apollo. Of course, Apollo came and killed him, as you can see in this picture. And as a punishment, he was staked to the ground in the underworld, and his liver was perpetually torn out by two vultures. But then it grew back again every day. We run into Sisyphus in the underworld, a guy who's responsible for trying to cheat death and for raping his own niece. What's his punishment? He has to roll a boulder up to the top of a hill, and as soon as it gets to the top, the boulder always rolls back down to the bottom. So if you've ever heard of a task being referred to as Sisyphean, it means it is endless and arduous. We also meet Tantalus, who served his own son to the gods as a meal. As payment for this, the gods have trapped him in a pool that comes up to his chin, from which he can never drink, and have put fruit trees over his head from which he can never eat. So he's tantalized for eternity. We then meet Tiresias, who is a great blind prophet of the ancient world, and he informs Odysseus of the following: that he will be marooned on Thrinacia, but if he eats the cattle of the sun, he will either be killed or will escape but come home badly in someone else's ship. Suitors will be in his house, but he will kill them either openly or by trick. However, he will have to travel with an oar over his shoulder until he comes to a place where someone asks if it's a winnowing van. There he will plant it in the ground and offer sacrifice to Poseidon. He will die peacefully and in prosperous circumstances. So what does this have to tell us about the end of the epic of the Odyssey? It tells us that Odysseus actually won't be done with his adventures when he comes to the end of the story we read, and he has more to do. Stay tuned for part 2 of this lecture on themes of the middle books of the Odyssey.